Hi, hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Jenny and I am a Canadian knitter living in a quite gloomy today, northeast of England. I feel like I'm always telling you about the weather. It's concern about light, I think, primarily. It's very dark today, so I've got some lights on. I don't actually have that much in color to show you. I've got much more. My knitting is mainly in shades today, so hopefully we'll be all right and it won't even matter if the colors are a bit distorted. So that is where I am joining you from today, and I've got quite a bit of knitting on the go. I've got more active projects than I am used to. I'm looking forward to going back to fewer projects on the go at once, hopefully after the holidays. But lots of fun knitting to share with you today. Some projects that I'm really keen and pleased with. So let's jump right into finished objects. So my first finished object for the day, which you may be able to see if I back up a little bit more, can you see the whole thing? Is my Hesper Shawl. It's all done and blocked and finished, and I am really in love with it. So a few things to say about the Hesper Shawl. This is a pattern I've been working on for a little while. I've talked about it before, so I won't repeat myself too much. But in the time since I filmed my last video, both the Hesper Shawl charts and the charts for the Hesper cardigan have been updated. There were some issues. There are no longer issues, so that's really good. So if you're keen on this kind of project and haven't done any mosaic knitting before, I think this has just become a much more accessible project. It was fairly accessible before, but now all the issues have been resolved. The charts are good to go. You can follow them 100%, and they should really kind of guide you into the mosaic knitting process so that you can become really comfortable. So that's really good. I knit this out of woolly knit. They're British cones, they're British 4-ply, and I held it double, so it's kind of coming in at a DK weight. The pattern called for sport weight, and the woolly knit held on its own is actually, it's quite a light fingering, I think, so I erred on the side of squishier rather than less squishy, and it is massive. So let me show you. I probably won't be able to get the whole thing in, but oh, I'm so pleased. I did fix, there was an issue, I think it was on this side. There was one stitch that I'd gotten wrong and I was a little bothered by it. Watching the video back last week, I couldn't even see it in the video, so that helped me to see that it wasn't a big deal, but I did do a duplicate stitch, and black yarn is so difficult to knit with in some ways, but in some ways it's so forgiving. I can't even find where I did that duplicate stitch anymore because it's just dissolved into the rest of the black. So very pleased with that. It has turned out absolutely massive, but I think that's so good. It's also quite heavy because I did it in DK, but I have been wearing it around the house and keeping it, you know, just for around my shoulders when I'm knitting or watching TV. I'm already getting quite a bit of use out of it, even though I haven't actually worn it out much yet. So really pleased. And I think that the stitches have just, the blocking has made everything really puff up and fill in all the holes, and it looks just beautiful. So very happy with that. Last time I was talking about the border and thoughts about what I would do with the border, and I did end up going with the kind of border I swatched for and showed last time. I wasn't, as I was knitting it when I was about halfway through and getting towards the end, I didn't know if I was happy with it, because they do look, you know, the scaling it down, I kind of played with these charts and tried to scale them down to about 50%, and you could scale them down to about 2/3 and still really keep the integrity. They really look like they're the same shape. At 50%, they don't really look like they're exactly the same shape anymore. They're much more squat, and the triangles are just a bit different. So I wasn't thrilled with that. I felt like it looked quite different, but with a bit of distance and blocking, I don't know, I've kind of done a 180. I was worried I wasn't going to love them, and instead I'm really pleased. I'm glad that I went with that. And it's fun to put, you know, kind of your own spin on a project a little bit. So that makes me really pleased. One of you also suggested really kindly last week that the pressed flowers motif from Amy Christopher's other patterns, she has a whole series of really popular patterns with the pressed flowers motif in mosaic knitting as well, and that was suggested as another possible border, and I think that's really clever. I think that's worth sharing because that's something that I might do in the future. But for this one, I'm pretty happy with that. Is there anything else to say about this? I don't think really. I've talked about it quite a bit before, so I think that that might be kind of all I needed to say about it. But I'm really, really pleased. I was quite sad to finish knitting this one, both because it was a really fun knit, and I often have a kind of melancholy at the end of a knitting project when I have to, I'm excited to have the object, but I'm also just sad about not having the project to knit on anymore. But I'm also realizing, as I'll go on to talk about most of the other things that I'm working on right now, in fact all of the other things that I'm working on right now are quite small projects, and I think working on this alongside the small projects and then finishing it has helped me to realize that I really do like having a bigger project on the go. Finishing and having to start new projects or having to pick up a new project to work on is maybe not my favorite part. That just feels like there's lots of decision making, and that's maybe not my favorite part of knitting, I'm realizing. So that was really interesting as well, just to kind of learn that about myself. I think I am going to stick with the tiny projects for now, just because I am enjoying them individually and I do have momentum, and lots of them are holiday knits that I would like to get done, so I'm gonna keep going with the small projects for now and not cast on anything else big. But this was really nice to have going on this autumn while I was doing lots of smaller projects, and I think that's something I'll keep in mind in future if I plan to do more gift knits, more small knits, kind of a big boom of them at once again. Then I might plan to have a nice big project on the go as well, for some continuity, I guess. I think that's everything I have to say about that. So I'll pop it back on, and we can talk about, I have one other finished object to share with you. Okay, so finished object number 2 is a hat. And it is in fact not a gift hat. It is a hat for me. So my 2 finished objects this week, are both grayscale, and they're both for me. But I enjoyed them both a lot. So this is a hat, a toque, as you can see, and actually the colors seem to be turning out in the camera even better than they are in the hat in real life, I think. So hopefully you can see that really clearly. But this is a hat that I've kind of drafted myself from some other sources. I'll talk about that in just a minute. But I made this with the leftover Plötulopi that my mother had bought me on her visit to Iceland a couple of years ago. This spring I knit a sweater for myself out of 2 of the grays. She bought me a bundle of kind of 3 different grays, and it wasn't a colorwork sweater, I did color blocking instead. So I really, to honor the what Icelandic wool is really designed to do, what it's really best suited to do, I wanted to do some colorwork with what I had left. So this is the hat that I went with. There are a few reasons that I knit this now, when I really should maybe have been knitting on gifts instead. And the first reason is that I am going to Canada in a couple of weeks for the holidays. The weather hasn't actually been much colder than ours here yet, but that often turns on a dime, and I don't have a really good, really thick, cozy hat. So I thought, Plötulopi, I'm holding it double throughout, and then there's the color work, so it's kind of like 4 strands together through lots of the color work. So I think that will really serve my purposes for a warm hat for myself for this holiday. The other reason that I decided to knit this hat at this time is because I also have leftovers of Plötulopi that my mom bought for herself, and then I knit her up a sweater. I made her the Store Stormer sweater, and I wanted to kind of do a hat for myself first, so use it as a kind of gauge swatch basically, I guess. And also I've kind of played with a colorwork motif for Mum's hat as well. So kind of sneaking in with my finished objects, a little cheat work in progress. I've just done the ribbing for Mum's hat in this lovely brown. I don't think I'm going to talk about this one too much now, because I haven't really gotten to the color work yet. There's not really much for you to see, but this I will certainly be talking about next time. So pop that away. Yes, so the chart. So I in some ways I'm really happy with this hat, in some ways not so happy. It's not my favorite thing that I've ever made. I was feeling kind of not thrilled with it initially. As usual, I think with me, my feelings towards it have softened as I've put it down and blocked it and just had some more distance. But basically, I've become really obsessed with sheep. I think getting so much back into knitting last year, but also, dipping my toes into spinning, and spinning different breeds and researching different breeds, I've really become kind of a big nerd about sheep. I'm really interested in sheep breeds and British sheep breeds especially, and I've been wanting to make myself a sheep hat for quite a while. So to come up with this motif for the sheep, I used as a kind of base a chart from the, it's called The Sheep Jacket by Martin Story, and that's where I really got the image for the big sheep. I did play with the chart a little bit. It's not exactly Martin Story's chart anymore, from The Sheep Jacket, but close enough that I think it's really important to clarify that I did not come up with this out of thin air. This is someone else's design. And then the reason I added in the little sheep was that I also have really been kind of admiring a sweater that an Icelandic sweater shop sells, that I've seen a few different places around and just really love, and that's called the Touque Icelandic wool sheep sweater. And it's quite different from how this has turned out, but it's got kind of big sheep and little sheep going around the yoke, and part of me really wants that sweater, but I bet that lots of you are the same. I'm a knitter. I'm not going to buy a sweater. I'd rather buy the wool and make the sweater myself. So this has not really satisfied that itch for me because it has turned out quite different, but that was kind of the inspiration behind the tiny sheep. And I just, I don't have access to any charts for that sweater, of course. I don't think there are hand knitting charts out there for that one. It's just a machine knit sweater that you can buy fully made. But that's why I came up with the little guys. And I'm really happy with the chart. The chart turned out how I wanted it to. What I don't love, maybe, is the way that the chart has worked in this yarn and at this gauge. The sheep have turned out just a bit bigger than I expected them to, and I should have expected them to turn out at this gauge. I knew what gauge I was knitting at. I did not swatch the color work, so that's on me. I didn't swatch the color work partially because I just figured it, if I didn't love it, it would still be really warm and I would wear it, which is definitely true. And also because I'm just using kind of the whole hat as a swatch really for the hat for mum, that I'm much more concerned about that being at a scale I like and fitting the way that I think she likes her hats to fit. So that's kind of the first thing. They've turned out a bit bigger than I expected. And I think it just is skewing a little bit more cutesy than I was expecting. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's just, it didn't come out at the scale I was expecting, so I definitely feel myself warming up to this scale. The other thing that I don't love about the way that the chart has worked in this yarn is I don't feel like you can actually see all three grays. So there is a zigzag. I think it's maybe a little bit clearer in the camera than it is in person, which is really good. But there is a zigzag of the kind of medium gray, which is the one I had the least of the medium gray left, because that's what I did most of the body of the sweater in the spring. So there is a zigzag at the bottom and a zigzag at the top, and I feel like in this yarn in person it just kind of melts away and you really only see the darkest yarn and the lightest yarn. So that's not ideal. But again, pas de fin du monde, not the end of the world. The final thing that I am taking from this hat experience and I'm going to apply to mums is I wanted this to be a fairly, not a loose fitting hat, I guess, but I wanted it to not be super tight. And that worked out really well. I'm very happy with the tension and the way that the hat fits, like the top of the hat. The ribbing though, I cast on 106 stitches because I've been knitting some hats for myself and my dad recently and hand spun, and that's kind of more at a DK weight. This would be more of a worsted or even an Aran holding the Pelotolopi double, but in the DK weight I was casting on kind of 120 stitches, and I was really happy with how those were fitting. So I cast on 106 and did 1 by 1 ribbing, and then the hat itself I decreased, and that's 100 stitches. I used a 4.5 millimeter millimeter needle for the ribbing and a 5mm needle for the hat and the colorwork, in case you're curious. Though as always, I'll clarify that I'm a tight knitter, so you know, results may vary for you. So I'm happy with how the main hat fits. I find the ribbing a bit loose, and that always worries me a little bit, just because I worry that it might not keep its integrity as well as if it was a bit more snug. So I wish I'd cast on, you know, 100 stitches for the ribbing and 4.5mm needles, and just stayed with the same stitch count up for the rest of the hat. But not the end of the world. I don't think there's going to be a lot of stress on the ribbing because the hat itself is not getting stretched out. So hopefully it'll be all right. And if it ever did stretch out, I could always go in and fix that up a little bit. But for now, it's, you know, it's a very wearable hat. I have been wearing this out already, and it's really, really warm and lovely. So yeah, I guess I'm sharing that partially because I feel like I'm generally fairly positive about the things that I knit, and that's a good thing. I like I try to have, like, you know, it's a hobby. It's something that I'm doing to bring myself comfort and happiness. So I try to be easy on myself about my knits. But I think, you know, it's also important to share that I'm not always 100% over the moon about everything that I knit, and, you know, that's all right. If this wasn't Plodolopi, I might have considered pulling it back and re-knitting it slightly differently. Maybe try to play with the chart to make it a bit smaller. But as it is, Plodolopi doesn't love being pulled out, and I'm not that unhappy with it. So I'm actually really liking it in the little viewfinder more than it looks good at a distance, which, you know, is sometimes something that's really helpful for me. That's something I didn't expect to get out of doing these kind of knitting walkthroughs, and that's always very interesting to see it kind of from a distance in the camera. So hat for me. Final thing I wanted to say about the hat. This hat I knit fairly quickly. It was just a couple of days. You know, it's like a really, really big gauge, and the chart wasn't complicated, and it's only ever 2 colors, so it was a fairly quick knit. But it took me a very long time to finish this. I think it sat for a full week and a half. Maybe not a full week and a half, a week. Just with me not having done the top. I'd woven in all the other ends. I'd finished it up perfectly everywhere else, but I didn't finish the hat. And the reason for that is I couldn't decide what I wanted to do with the top of the hat. And I'm going to say something controversial, so brace yourselves. But I don't believe in pom-poms. I just don't believe in pom-poms for hats. I believe in pom-poms for hats for other people who want pom-poms on their hats. I believe pom-poms on hats are adorable. I really like them. I think they're so cute. And I wish I was a pom-pom on hats people. I wish I was a pom-pom on hats person. Struggling with words today. But I don't believe in pom-poms for myself. And the reason I don't believe in pom-poms for myself is just because I get really cold, and I come from a place that gets really, really, really bitterly cold in the winter. And I no longer live somewhere that gets really, really bitterly cold in the winter, but I live somewhere where there's a heck of a wind, and that wind can be really sharp and cold. So I always like to have the option to pull a hood up over my hat. I feel like, especially if it's windy, but whenever it's really cold, I just feel like I'm surprised every time I pull a hood up. What a difference that makes, how much more heat that keeps in. So no pom-pom. But I felt like this, you know, like this is a pretty classic Touque style hat, you know, and they often, you know, a pom-pom would be very suitable. So I instead, and where has it run way to? Here. So I was toying with the idea. I made myself a braid. See if you can see that. Out of all 3 of the colors. And this was, to get this kind of thickness of braid, I used 4 strands of each of the 3 grays. And I was playing with the idea of putting a tassel on the hat. But I found this one just a bit small, and I thought I would have had to do 3 of them probably to get kind of a proportion that I liked. And I felt like that was a really good alternative to a pom-pom, and I sat with it for quite a while. And then I just, you know, I think that would have emphasized some of the kind of cuter elements of the chart that I wasn't in love with. So I ultimately decided not to do that, not to make a tassel for the hat. But I think that is something that could work really well as an alternative to a pom-pom for me in future, on different hats maybe that have a slightly different feel. So I'm definitely going to keep that in mind. But I just, you know, I wanted to share because I don't know how everyone else feels about finishing their hats. I know, you know, like I love a pom-pom, and I have made pom-poms for hats on friends hats that I have gifted to friends. But I like to be able to pull up a hood. So that is that hat, which I've babbled about quite a bit. But all in all, you know, not my favorite thing that I've knit in the last little while, but also I think really practical. And cute isn't a bad thing, so yeah. Right, so I've already mentioned a bit that I have lots of things on my needles, and I'm conscious that I have a few things that I've kind of presented to you once as a new cast on, and then I haven't talked about it again for a while. So I just wanted to kind of catch up on a few of those things before I talk about new things that I've cast on. And the main ones are the socks that I cast on ages ago. I haven't made a ton of progress on them, if I'm honest, but I just wanted to check in to show you that I haven't forgotten about them. So I'm still on the first sock. This is knit out of Touque Soul Wool, which is a non-superwash sock yarn that has 25% synthetic fibers in it, but they're recycled synthetic fibers. So I really like that. And so I've knit kind of the base of the foot bit of the sock, and I've come right up to where I'm going to be doing the toes, the toe decreases, but really I think this sock is probably going to sit in this bag until well after the holidays, because I've got lots of other little projects and lots of little easy projects on the go that kind of fill the same need for me that this sock knitting does. So I wanted to show you that I haven't forgotten it. I'm still excited about these socks. I'm still definitely going to finish them, but I probably will still be putting them away for a little while. So that is sock number 1. And the other thing that I cast on, since I did the last video, I showed you a swatch for this, is I have started knitting gloves for my brother. Really only have the cuff at this point. And I won't talk about these too much today, just because I don't think that there's really enough to talk about yet. I've done lots of the math. I mentioned that I was using a kind of guide pattern from Nimble Needles to do this, where you take measurements of the hand that you're making the glove for, and you know, information from your gauge swatch. So I did do a good gauge swatch, which I showed you last time. This is in just opal sock yarn, fairly indestructible, and superwash, which I think for my brother will be good. So I am working on those. I've done lots of the math, but one of the reasons that I have not made a ton of progress on these is time is going so quickly. And I realized that I still have, you know, a fair bit of time to knit before I have to gift things, but I will be staying with my parents for a while before we all celebrate the holidays, so it's better to get the knitting for them done sooner, because if I work on my brother's knits while I'm staying with them, that's not a big deal. They can see his present. I'd rather theirs be a little bit of a surprise if I can manage it. So I have not forgotten these. I am still working on these. I'm not convinced that I'm going to get them done by the holidays, just because I haven't knit gloves before and I'm not sure how long those fingers are going to take me. Or rather, I'm not sure if I'm going to find the fingers frustrating or not and put them down and not work on them continuously or not. But that is still very much a plan. And I'm planning to knit, as I mentioned last time, a hat for my brother too. So at the very least, if it looks like these might not get done, then I'll whip out the hat pretty quickly, because that won't take a lot of time. I think that those were the two I wanted to touch on. Now I have some other knits, you know, since the spring that I've started and put away, and I have not forgotten any of them. They're still around, but I wanted to update you on these two quickly. All right, so then I have 2 scarves to talk to you about. It's noon. We've lost so much light. It must be an even bigger cloud outside right now. It's still noon. Alright, so I have 2 remaining projects, 2 new projects to share with you, and they're both the same pattern, and they're both gifts. So let me start off by showing you one and then the other, and I'll talk about them both together. So this is the first one. I'm sorry, that's making a bit of noise. Let's put that down. So this is the first one. I have knit this pattern before. I imagine some of you have also knit this pattern or one similar. And here's the second one. So I haven't gotten terribly far on either. As you may have guessed, these are a Simple Thing shawls, and I've got 2 of them on the go. This is a pattern that, I mean, it's you know, quite similar to the Sophie shawl that is so popular, though they have slightly different shapes at the bottom of the scarf, especially, I think, and different stitch counts and things like that. And I knit myself a handspun scarf in this pattern in March or April, or sometime in the spring, and really love it. I have gotten quite a bit of wear out of it, and my mom kind of said, ooh, that's quite nice. And so this is actually made out of alpaca. It's fingering weight alpaca from a farm that we visited when I was last home. My mom, brother, and I all went together, and I'll talk more about that next week, I think, because I'm probably going to devote a bit more time. Hopefully I've made a bit more progress on this scarf by then. But I wanted to show it to you here because I think I might pull this out. I'm happy with my knitting. I'm happy with the way that this is looking, but I underestimated how far this yarn would get me. So I have 85 grams of this. Got so it's the Alpaga de la Petite Côte. That's the name of the farm that we went to. And they have these lovely tickets with information. So fingering weight yarn, 185 meters, 85 grams. And I was thinking about the weight, the grams, more than I was thinking about the meterage, and figured that I would make this quite a gentle slope. So the pattern, it's a free pattern, so I feel like it's appropriate to share some details. It's all right to share some details. The pattern has you increasing on one side of the shawl every 4 rows. And the shawl that I did in the spring, I increased every 8 rows. I was really happy with that. I really thought that I wasn't going to have very much of this yarn at all. So I decided to increase every 12 rows. And I was picturing kind of being able to get kind of twice this length out of it and maybe nothing more. I'm not sure why I thought that, because once I started, you know, once I got to this point, it became very clear that that doesn't make any sense. I think because alpaca is so drapey and so warm, in my mind, alpaca must be heavier than wool, when in fact I think the opposite is actually true, because it's got a hollow inside, doesn't it? So alpaca, you actually get more bang for your buck, as it were. You get more meterage for weight. Because I have 85 grams, and this, rather than being close to, you know, I thought it would be at least 30%, 40%, 50% of the total weight. This is only about 15 grams. So yeah, it's going to be just a really long, really skinny scarf, and I'm not sure that I want it to be that long and that skinny. So I am considering pulling this back and just knitting it at a steeper angle. Maybe go back to every 8 rows doing an increase, or maybe even every 6. I have not fully decided yet. I will admit also, I think this is a really charming pattern. I think it's a really wearable pattern. It's quite minimalist. I think it goes with lots of things. And I know that, you know, that's part of what interests Mom in this pattern, and that's part of what my goal was with the other gift knit that I'm working on. But I am definitely getting a little bit bored. These are the 2 things that I've been knitting on most recently, and I basically put this aside once I realized that maybe I wasn't happy with the increase rate, to work on something else and kind of let this percolate before I knit too much more, because I sometimes fall victim to that habit of realizing that something is wrong and that I really am not going to be happy with it, and I'm going to want to pull it out, but I just keep knitting in the hope that it will resolve itself. So to keep myself from doing that, I put this aside. I don't know. I'm looking at some other patterns. I think this is such a fun pattern. I think it's just that it is quite basic. It's great TV knitting, but the things that I've been working on recently are not terribly challenging, and so I think a bit more variety, a bit more of a challenge might be more interesting at this time. So we'll see. I wanted to show it to you before I pull it out. I don't know. What do you think? So that may look very different when I show it to you next, but this other one, I'm definitely going to keep doing this pattern. And actually it worked out quite well that I had a bit of a moment of, ooh, maybe I'm not happy with this for the shawl that I was working on for Mum, because a member of my husband's extended family, someone we both love a lot, has had a quite serious health diagnosis, and I had not been planning on doing any knitting for my partner's family this year. I've done knitting for them in the past. They all have hats from me, and you know, this year we thought we would focus on my family since that's who we're going to spend the holidays with, and I would do knitting for my in-laws next year. But this health diagnosis has really had us thinking about that person, and you know, just wanting to be there to support them, and that isn't really possible. We live quite far away. This family member lives in London, quite near to my partner's parents. So I thought a knitted hug is the next best thing. And my husband will be going down to London in a little while. I don't travel terribly well anymore. My health just means that traveling takes quite a bit out of me, and I need quite a bit of recovery time on either end. I need preemptive recovery time before I take a train ride, and recovery time afterwards. So we decided that just he would go so that it would be less stressful for him. But I want to send this as a gift. So it was quite handy that I needed to just pause with that other scarf to think about it anyways, because this project was not planned more than a little while ago, and is the one with the tightest deadline at this point. So again, this is a simple thing shawl. This one I am knitting at a DK weight, so it's going a bit faster, and I am increasing every 8 rows the way that I did on the version I knit with my hand spun in the spring. So I have an idea of what the slope is going to be. I have an idea of what size this scarf might turn out to be. I again didn't swatch because it just doesn't really matter, but I'm quite happy with that so far. And I did want to talk about the yarn a little bit because, you know, it's a gift, and I'm always happier to splurge for a gift, really, than I am for myself. Not that I don't splurge for myself, because I definitely do. But I don't know, it feels nice to really think about someone and what kind of yarn they would like. And I wanted, we were talking with my partner's mum, and she suggested that gray might be a really good color, and it's a bit silly because I have so much gray yarn. Gray is one of my neutrals for sure, so I have quite a bit of gray yarn in stash. Probably more gray yarn than other colors or shades. But I am really not fussed by rustic yarn. I mean, you know, I don't love really, really itchy yarn. I usually wear a long sleeve t-shirt under my sweaters, so that helps with irritation. But I suspect that this family member is more sensitive than I am. My husband is quite sensitive to itchy knits, so I anticipate that this family member is going to be a bit more like that. And also, you know, she'll be in hospital having treatments and things like that, so I just thought soft is better. So I did some research and was looking around, really trying to find something that would be nice, still in British wools if possible. I think that this family member would really appreciate that, but you know, something local but also really soft. And I settled on, this is Rowan Moordale, which I read online, lots of people just kind of, you know, really celebrating how soft it is and how beautifully it knits up. So it is a gray. Let me see if I can hold that up for you, but I don't know if you can see. It's a little bit more of a bluey gray than I expected it to be, but I think that that's all right. And it's quite, it's not speckled, but it's not a solid color, and that is partially because this is 70% British wool and 30% British alpaca, and the alpaca is a kind of browner fiber, and it hasn't taken a dye in the same way at all. So it's got some depth to it, and I quite like that you can kind of see the different fibers, and I think that the recipient will be really interested in that as well. And it is really beautifully soft. Very, very nicely soft and very drapey, which again is not always what I'm looking for in a yarn. I quite like a bit of rustic body, but I think, I mean, this is, I've got stitch markers on, so it's extra drapey right now. It's got some extra weight, but I think that will be a really nice, gentle, soft scarf against her neck. So I was quite happy with that. I also, you know, Rowan yarns can be, for me at least, on the pricier end of what I'm comfortable paying. Very happy to pay full price for a gift like this, you know, where I really want to send it with lots of love. But I think that Rowan is possibly discontinuing the Moordale range. They started in 2019 from what I can tell, and lots of it appears to be on sale right now. So they're either discontinuing it, or maybe they're just retiring their current batch of colors and will be coming out with more colors. But if you're interested in drapey, soft British yarns, then it's, you know, I got this for 50% off, which to me is great. I was really pleased with that. So I may even, I'll finish knitting up with this and see how it goes, but maybe I'll even buy one in a different color because they have some beautiful colors as well. So that is how this is going. I am not sure how the timing is going to work, about whether I will show this to you when it's done or whether it will already have gone off on its trip to London. But I'll certainly take some pictures of it, and hopefully that will send some love on my behalf since I can't be there in person. But yeah, so that is Simple Things Shawl. Yeah, I think it's really beautiful the way that you can see the alpaca in there as a kind of darker fiber. I really like that. All right, so I think that is everything I wanted to talk to you about today. I was feeling a bit like I had lots of things I wanted to touch on, and that it was going to end up being really long, and I didn't want to hold you hostage too long or bore you, but I think that it's gone all right. We haven't babbled too much about the different projects. So going forward, I'm planning to finish up Mum's hat hopefully for next time, finish up this, think about what I'm doing with the scarf for Mum. I might also next time talk about the alpaca farm a little bit more, because it was a really nice experience, and is part of the story of knitting those things for me. So I've got some other alpaca to knit up for my brother as well. So I think from here until the holidays, as long as it still is pleasurable, because I don't believe in letting gift knits become stressful, especially because I think that my family really appreciate knit gifts. I think they really like them. They wear them a lot, but I know that the knitting of it is really more for me than for them. Like, you know, I think that the intention of knitting them with all that love to send off to family members is really important to me. I don't think they would mind if they got it a month later or sometime later. You know, like I think that part of it is not so important. So I will keep going as long as it is not stressful. But I think I'm on track to get things done the way that I wanted to, and I'm thinking ahead to bigger projects that I can cast on for some kind of more long-term enjoyment. Are you guys like that? I know that, you know, we often talk about whether we're monogamous or non-monogamous knitters, and I definitely used to be a monogamous knitter, and I'm finding, you know, non-monogamy to be good in lots of ways for my knitting. It's good on my hands, I think, good to work with different tensions, work with different yarn weights and things like that. But I'm also realizing that I think the stage between finishing one project and casting on the next is maybe my least favorite stage of knitting, the part where you kind of have to settle on a pattern, settle on yarn, figure out gauge, figure out if you're gonna, you know, in the case of the scarves here, figure out if you're gonna knit it at a different rate, how you're gonna play around with it. I think that's just lots of decision making, which is enjoyable in itself, but it's not as much fun as knitting. I'd rather have that done and be knitting most of the time. So I think that's part of the reason that lots of tiny projects is not my favorite thing, because it just means that there is more of that. There are more of those intervals. So last little while of knitting like that, and then hopefully getting into some bigger things again. I hope that if you are knitting for the holidays, that is going well and that you are getting some joy out of it, in addition to hopefully the joy that you will be giving to someone with that kind of really loved object. And I hope that you are doing well. I hope that you're keeping drier than we are here in the Northeast. And I wish you lots of happy knitting and crafting, and a happy beginning of December, whether you are looking forward to holidays this month or not. So thank you so much, as always, for joining me. It's been a real pleasure to chat through my knits with you, and I will talk to you next time.